All right, here we go. Street Talk with Rudy from Ballard, Kurt, and our guest, James Donaldson.
All right.
What a guest to have, too. Seattle Supersonics, mayoral candidate for Seattle.
Yeah.
I almost can't believe it, but here we are. So,
Good.
we talked a little bit about how we're going to do things here before we started, so we'll just jump right into it. The biggest issue, I think, right now that we've talked about is homelessness and is crime surrounding homelessness. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, as a mayoral candidate, what are your ideas on that? You know, recently I listened to a portion of a podcast with the mayor from Austin, Texas, and he was talking about that. I don't know if you've heard any part of that.
I didn't hear that one, no, but I do listen in to quite a few of these different conversations. So pretty up to speed on it, on what everybody's trying to do.
Yeah. Well, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, the thing is, everybody kind of got behind the eight ball even further with COVID last year, 2020. Basically, causing our shelters to socially distance, and the capacity went down about 35% of what they could take into the shelters and the affordable housing. So that increased our homelessness on the street by about 50%, over the last year here in Seattle. So we've got a huge number of folks on the street now, more than ever before. I don't think the strategies and things we've implemented over the years has really been that effective. We tend to throw a lot of money at it. We tend to let small nonprofit agencies do this and that. None of that has been really that effective. My take on it, especially as a mayoral candidate and hopefully as our next mayor, would be to really have an intervention type program with all of our homeless population, getting to know who each and every one of them are and what they are dealing with. I mean, it might be substance abuse, it might be mental health issues, it might be loss of a job, loss of family, financial issues, criminal backgrounds that they're running from. All of those kind of things force people to make kind of live in the shadows and stay off the radar as best they can. So first of all, let's find out exactly what it is that they're dealing with, and then be able to provide those services from the city to get them back on their feet again. And housing is going to be the most crucial part of this whole equation. We need more and more housing. I'm a big advocate of the tiny home villages and things around town, affordable housing. If we can find, hotels that are no longer going to function as a hotel, be able to purchase those kind of buildings and house more and more people in those kind of facilities. So I'm for all those kind of things and more. If people can come up with more creative ideas of how to create more housing, that's always going to be the best solutions for everybody. So once we get an adequate supply, an inventory of housing, then we can be able to pull people, help them off the streets, put them into a nice home environment that's safe, comfortable. They no longer have to worry about the weather elements out there. They no longer have to worry about losing their personal belongings, to thievery and all those kind of things. They no longer have to worry about being swept out and picked up and forced to move on somewhere else. So that's really my approach to it, is find out first of all what they're suffering from, provide those services, and be able to put them into a adequate housing facility for them. I was just watching a great program this past weekend on CBS Sunday morning, one of the Sunday morning shows. They had a program in there called House First, or Housing First. And it really was all about providing housing first. Then you can be able to, once a person has one of those basic necessities of life taken care of, a shelter, then you can provide the services. And they showed a lot of nice little, studio apartment type facilities where it was clean, it was efficient, it was warm, it was out of the elements. Now the social service providers come in and provide all the different services that they need. And those folks who were homeless are now having a place to call home. And it just really makes the progress we need to make on this, just really ramp up very, very quickly, because now you've taken care of their first need, and now you can take care of all the other ones after that.
That seems very practical, and that's exactly what I forget the name of the mayor of Austin, but that's exactly what he was saying, is that you need to attack the issue of being homeless first,
Yes.
and then you can attack the issues that cause the homelessness
That's right.
at a later time. And he was talking about, they had a program, it was for vets specifically, but he was hoping to expand it to the rest of the population, where they worked with property owners, landowners, and they made an arrangement that if those property owners leased their space to these homeless vets,
Yeah.
then if there were any issues with them trashing the place or anything like that, they would contact this entity, and the next day they would get a check for reimbursement. And then
Wow.
and they people were hesitant, and they said, oh, it's government, there's no way. Well, the mayor's office apparently, or the city worked with, they had like a private public partnership with a couple of entities, and those private entities were the ones that paid the property owners so that they could expedite the process, build trust in the system. I'm wondering if something like that. The other thing that he was talking about was, it seemed like to me, he was working towards opening up building restrictions. So, for example, instead of having a purely commercial zoned area, you have a mixed use where if somebody wants to build residential or wants to add on residential onto a commercial project, they can do so. Are these all things that you would consider?
Definitely under consideration. You have to have an imagination to be able to vision something that's different than what hasn't been working in the past. So being able to work with different codes on businesses, whether they're regulated for commercial use or for residential use, be able to talk to those commercial use landlords and say, hey, let's look at this lease. Let's see if we can make it a hybrid of sorts. And at least until our economy gets back and all these office buildings downtown are filled back in, right now we've got a tremendous amount of vacancy all over town. So we should be able to work with those kind of landlords and those commercial lease agents and rewrite that lease for residential, temporary residential. And all my housing solutions are transitional. I don't want any of them to be permanent housing. The ideal is to get the person off the street into a transitional program even of services that are needed. After 6 months or a year, now you're transitioning into a regular, real, everyday neighborhood, apartment, house, whatever it is, with all that support that's been provided and will continue to be provided for you. So we don't want to just abandon people just because we got them off the street or gave them a temporary place to stay. No, this should continue on. This is part of our humanitarian approach to really taking care of each and every one of us and making sure we're back on our feet as best we can.
It's part of the process, right?
It is.
I'm wondering, a bit of a philosophical question for you. Where do you believe the distinction is between what government should do for people in this regard and what our private societies and nonprofit organizations should do for people?
Well, I think you have to have a hybrid model of both. That's when things tend to work best. Now, being a private enterprise guy myself for 28 years running my own business, I feel that the private sector always does better and more efficient work than our public sector does, the government sector. Simply because we don't have to deal with all the bureaucratic layers and the processes and the departments. I mean, as a business owner, I was able to make my decisions and, we could change directions as we needed to. We were very nimble that way. Government can't do that. And so I think government has to be able to vet agencies that are going to be doing a really good job on their behalf. Make sure that they have the resources necessary, the personnel necessary, and to be able to backfill and fund those services that will be provided. So I think that's the best partnership type of setup for a private and a public sectors coming together. We can do better. I know we can, and we will do better. I mean, as mayor, I want to eliminate some of our bureaucratic layers of things because it just bogs the system down. Things should be much more expedient than they are, and they have been in the past. And that's something I want to really work on.
The university the universities and community colleges has this program called Homestay, where the international students come to Seattle.
Yes.
And they are provided a place to live in a private residence.
Right.
And what do you think about Oxford houses? Back in the 90s, King County, when I was on the Division of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Board, we used to allocate money for Oxford houses for people that are clean and sober to stay in recovery, and the house themselves would be the ones to decide whether somebody goes or stays.
Yeah.
And if somebody relapses, they have to get a UA and by a doctor, and if it comes back negative, they may give them a second chance. You know, let's get you back on in a plan. Let's get you back working, back where you belong. And a lot of successes we've seen over the years is people that have a safe place and a job.
Yes.
You know, they create their own wealth,
Both those things.
and so they're not waiting for that that monetary source at the end of the month. Like right now, there's this gap amongst people that are on the streets that are not going to see anything until Wednesday,
And
or
they know
Tuesday
that.
or Wednesday, and
Yeah.
they know that.
And they know that.
So between, what do I do between now and
Yeah.
then, because I've exhausted all my resources, and I'm in a funk, I'm depressed, you owe me, so I'm gonna take it on you, you know, and next thing is they're going into the storefronts and they're taking what they want and with no consequence. But what do you think about Oxford House, or,
Yeah.
encouraging somebody that wants to rent out their home
Yeah.
to be able to rent it out for clean and sober, or for those that are nonviolent, mentally ill offenders?
Right,
You know,
right,
mental
right.
health, we need to find a place for them to stay.
Yes.
And
That's
so
right.
who's gonna be monitoring that versus?
Yeah, I love the idea. I think the reason the cities have been reluctant to do those kind of programs is because of liability issues. I mean, you're taking someone in off the street who obviously has some issues, staying in a residential home that you're renting out a room of. Matter of fact, I was a homestay family myself for an international student years ago, so I know about the homestay programs. And those are wonderful programs, you know, but you need to have someone that, you know, is really stable and clean and sober as best they can be, to stay in those kind of environments, especially if there's young children around. I mean, you can't mix all these things together. Even the homestay applications are pretty thorough. What kind of pets you have, how many kids you have, you know, how many people are in the house, all those kind of things, they want to know. And so, but there's so many people around Seattle that really are supportive of our homeless folks. Even when they're on the streets, they're very supportive, almost enabling. I don't want to enable this to continue on. I mean, I want to teach someone how to fish and they can feed themselves for a lifetime, rather than, you know, we continue to feed them. So to get them off their feet, you know, give them a job, and that builds their self-esteem, their ability to think that they can make it on their own now, is really the best approach, I feel. But I'd like to look into a homestay type program. I mean, I think with all the great attorneys we have around town, they could probably draw up a pretty ironclad agreement that would reduce the liability, especially from the city.
They definitely don't want to create a flop house in the middle of a
No.
single-family residential neighborhood.
No,
You
of
know,
course not.
and that's one of the issues that have popped up regarding, especially Ravenna, where those places were being used for flop houses, and
Yes.
and they had to shut it down. There were rats and stuff that was running rampant in
Yeah.
the housing and stuff.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the houses? So, is this a situation where somebody, like a family, would bring in an international student, or in this case, one homeless person, or is this something where a bunch of international students, or in this case, homeless people, would stay in one house and they would all be together?
Well, the way the homestay works, usually they have one or two international students together for the students themselves. Rarely have I seen 5, 6, 7 kids in one household. That's just, they want to make it, you know, as safe and normal and natural a family setting as possible. And that's 1 or 2 additional people, not 6 or 7 or 10. 6 or 7 or 10, it does turn into a flop house kind of place. I mean, they're all there. Who's managing this? Who's monitoring this? Who's inspecting this on a regular basis to make sure everything's going well? So I'm much more in favor of, 1 or 2 folks per, residential home around town that wants to be part of this program. That would really go a long ways towards solving our housing program if we can come up with something. Like
especially with the Oxford houses, I believe it's somebody that goes into a inpatient program where they're in for 25 to 30 days, and then they transition out of inpatient back into the community.
Right.
And that's when they would be linked into an Oxford house, and they get met by the group.
Yes.
The group that lives there, and then they interview them, and then they either decline or approve based on their how the interview goes. And I've seen lots of my pals over the years succeed
Good.
in that kind of environment versus being put into a unit where there's drugs and alcohol surrounding them, and it's a trigger that they end up it's almost an instant relapse.
Of course.
Waiting to happen.
Of course,
And,
of course. Yeah.
Speaking of drugs and alcohol, do you care if I smoke this in here?
No, I'm
Does it bother you?
good. No,
Okay. Just blow it the other way.
Yeah, I'll blow it the other way.
You should let our viewers know what you're doing.
Oh yeah, here's. I'm not a spokesman for Puff Bar, so they're gonna have to find their own advertising. The idea of this is interesting to me because I think so many of our problems as a society right now are due to disconnection from each other. And if we were to figure out a solution where people could volunteer to bring in somebody who is homeless, in need of help, in need of support.
That's right.
Right? I think that could be a great bridge to the community, and it could also open people's eyes maybe a little bit to the truth of the matter. And I think that truth is a lot more complex than maybe any of us can even comprehend. So it seems like a really cool idea, and I'd love to see how it would play out. I mean, it might be a mess, but
I would like to.
I still stand by that. I still stand by a structured environment that has some sort of a contract that we sign as we come out of some sort of inpatient or rehabilitation, and have a code of conduct agreement. And if we violate that code of conduct, then we can appeal it. But otherwise, it becomes very difficult to get that person removed without some sort of tangible contract that can show that, we gave this person an opportunity, he or she violated it, we've given them multiple chances, but it's not gonna work, we're gonna find somebody else. I mean, it really, and it helps the larger group. It's sad to see Mary or Johnny have to go their own way, but don't suck the rest of us into your the actions that are bringing other subjects into our home. Because I've seen so many times where somebody will bring others in and violate those rules, family or the house rules, and become very difficult to live with.
Yeah, and maybe this is applicable only to a certain category of homeless folks. Those maybe have lost their job, just fell on hard luck. But they're, mentally they're all there. They don't have any substance abuse issues. They're just on the street. They don't have a place to stay. And those are the folks that probably would, show the least amount of risk of something going wrong. Getting them back on their feet, a place to stay with a great family.
I think the city is capable of doing something like that. With all the
Yeah,
funding
but
sources.
like I said, with liability issues, I am sure that's the reason they don't do it. Because all you need is one family to sue the city for, $20 million, $50 million, molested a little girl that stays in the house. Now you got some big problems. The city doesn't want to take that on. How you going to protect against that?
But if I have a home, if I have a home that I want to rent out, and I decide to rent it, in this particular, for this particular population.
For a group
For
of
a
them?
group, for a group.
Well, then you
like
got a
group
group, you got a
home.
group home, yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be an option, I think, that needs to be floated out there, I would think.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure
it's
that's
an
occurring without the city's knowledge right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure it does occur.
Yeah.
People have a lot of homes that they rent and rent out. But yeah, the city should get on board with those kind of programs and just really be able to monitor it, make sure it's safe, subject to regulation and codes, and it's not a, you know, not a negative impact on the neighborhood that it's located in. Yeah, those things are great. Yeah.
He is the man.
He's the man.
You know, I mean,
I
we're.
mean, it's just common sense. You're
It
just
is.
common sense. I
It
mean,
is.
it's like talking, you know, having a cup of coffee at
Yeah.
the, or having a little brunch or dinner. He's the man.
Well, this is how I want to
That's
approach
cool.
all these things. It's just a very common sense approach to everything, you know, I mean.
Don't speak over our head. It just speaks
No,
right to
no.
us, with us, and about us.
I think also being able to, you know, congregate a group of folks together, I mean, dozens of homeless folks together in one large central location with all the services provided there would be an ideal situation too. I don't know where you would put it, but, you know, those are things that we have to explore, or maybe even make it a smaller version and put it in each and every neighborhood. I think all of our neighborhoods need to share the brunt of the burden and responsibility of homelessness. You know, North Seattle can't escape, you know, we want to throw everything down to South Seattle. No, everybody has a little facility, maybe a dozen homeless folks living there, and the services are being provided on around, you know, regular, routine basis by the city.
I think one of the biggest issues you alluded to earlier, actually, is that the homelessness issue is multifaceted. There's all sorts of different types of homeless.
That's right.
Some homeless folks, perhaps it would serve them to be in a group with other homeless folks and they're trying to, you know, support each other and get back going. But for some, perhaps it would be just the opposite. Perhaps they would drag each other down, right? And then same thing, maybe some, it would work well to put them into homes, maybe even with children, right? And then for some, it doesn't make any sense for them to be around children. So it is complicated when it comes to that. I tend to believe that even though well-intentioned, government generally does not help with these problems.
No.
Government generally makes these problems worse.
Yes,
yes,
that's right.
And so that's why I'm really interested to talk to you too, and that's why I asked you the philosophical question earlier, because I tend to think, now I'm nobody, but I tend to think that perhaps we're just going about this the wrong way. Perhaps what we really need to do is we need to come together as a community. And I know some people link that with government, but I do not believe that to be linked with government. I believe that to be linked with people. And if we came together as people and figured out these solutions, I think we could achieve some real good positive things. But when we elect officials and then there's bureaucracy involved, like you said, and red tape and corruption, we don't like to talk about that, but that's there too.
Of course.
You know, all of these things, it ends up actually hurting even the people we're trying to help.
It does.
So what are we going to do about all that?
Yeah, well, you know, we have to have innovative approaches and just really be able to visualize something that's different. You know, for instance, in a home that we're talking about, you would almost need to have surveillance or video cameras going, just to be sure. I mean, this is a safety precaution you have to take to reduce the risk and liabilities of everything that's happening. And it doesn't come down to a he said, she said kind of thing. The homeowner says one thing about the homeless person, the homeless person says one thing, and they're back and forth, you know.
That's why this has to be pardon the interruption, that's why this has to be a partnership. You have to figure out a way to make it a partnership between people. It can't be, oh, I just want to fill out the application because then I get $2,000 from the government every month.
That's right, no. So, you know, but it can be done. And now those are the things I want to take on and just kind of really, you know, come up with a creative way to approach it. Bring a lot of good, smart people around the table. We talk about it, we put it together. You know, we take our, you know, ideological hats off and just say, what's practical? What makes sense? It doesn't make sense to put a grown-up stranger in a house with a young child. That's just not going to happen, and you can't let it happen.
I have a question. How do you plan on funding our basic services and making sure that our services are met on on a quarterly basis, you know, and because usually it's seasonal work.
Yes.
Some things
yes.
we do in the winter, sometimes we do things in the summer, other times we do in the fall, but there's always planning around that.
That's right.
Especially when it comes to, when we're repaving, we gotta do it when it's dry.
Of course,
And when
of course.
the leaves are coming down, we need to make sure that we prevent urban runoff.
Right, right,
And
right,
then,
right.
and then the maintenance on our infrastructure, bridges, roads,
Yeah.
buildings and stuff.
You switched from homelessness to.
Yeah, we got, you know what, I switched out because there's our job opportunities
Yes,
there
yes,
for
yes.
people. One of the biggest complaints I hear, what are you gonna do for people of color to get employment and service, you know, outside of,
Yeah.
of, what the, there's no question there are people of color that are hurting right now because they're not getting, there's a hand up.
Yeah,
They're just being left to fend for themselves while people talk about them, profiting off them, yet that money's not getting to encourage them to create their own wealth
Absolutely.
or something that is gonna make them
Yeah.
feel good of their self-worth, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Nothing like making $100 'cause I earned it
That's
versus
right.
somebody throwing me $100 that I hustled, and then what's my next hustle?
that's right.
And then,
It
you know,
never stops.
It's a vicious cycle
Yeah,
of
yeah,
one
it
versus the other.
It
and-
never stops. Well, what you're talking about, I think a lot of that, excuse me, is a budgetary item. So when the city council and the mayor put together the city budget, line item, line item, line item, you have to be able to allocate those resources properly for more towards what you're talking about, the infrastructure projects, you know, the housing, the street cleaning, you know, the sewage drain outs and everything else. Those are things that we can project because they are somewhat seasonal. We know it's going to be a bigger demand during the summertime than it is during the wintertime for certain services. So a lot of that's going to be budgetary. But, you know, our revenues have dried up a little bit because of COVID last year. Our businesses that went out of business are no longer feeding into our tax coffer of B&O taxes and all the rest of that. You know, so sales went down. Everything is really in a recessionary mode right now that every major metropolitan area in the country is going to have to dig themselves out of. I think Seattle is blessed to have so many great, you know, technological companies around town, high income earning jobs available. And I think, you know, one of my thoughts is to go around to all of our big tech companies that got hit with our head tax and our high income earner tax and ran 40,000 jobs out of here over to Bellevue, to say, hey guys, why don't we create a fund to help our small businesses? If you paid, you know, $80 million in taxes last year with a head tax, why don't you pay $20 million to a fund, okay? And what will we leave you with those head taxes? You pay that 20 million, you pay 20, you know, so now you got a couple $100 million to work with for our small businesses. Our small businesses were really hurt last year because, you know, they operated at 25% capacity when they could operate. They had tremendous expenses with all the plastic partitions and all the social distancing, all the outdoor little, you know, sidewalk cafes and things. They had to come out of their own pocket for.
And sometimes over and over again, right?
Oh, yes, yes, as things changed and, you know, shut up, you know, opened up and then shut down again, opened up. So we went through hell last year. Small businesses in particular, most of those small businesses that closed are not going to be coming back. It's just totally unreasonable to expect them to be able to get those resources together again one more time and say, okay, let's try it again. Those jobs that we lost, a lot of those are not coming back. And so we need to be able to have our big businesses, big corporate giants like Amazon and Microsoft and all the rest of them around town to say, hey, here's a couple $100 million, and we're going to be able to help our small businesses, reimburse them once for the expenses they incurred in 2020, but also be able to get them back on their feet again by, you know, helping with supplemental income, maybe small grants that they can apply for, easy application grants. Here's 10 grand for you to run your business, you know, come back again in the next quarter and get another 10 or whatever you need. Those are the kind of things that we need to be thinking about.
That gets me really excited thinking about the idea. I know it's not totally abolishing a tax,
Yes.
but you're talking about taking a tax that is right now a burden on the system
That's right.
and alleviating it by using those funds to go into other businesses. I think that's a really creative approach, really cool.
Exactly. I mean, you can't blame Amazon for picking up 40,000 jobs and moving to Bellevue.
It's a disincentive. We give them a disincentive
That's right.
to stay here.
And the rest of the big corps and big tech companies are going to do the same thing. Why should our surrounding cities benefit when we can just easily say, okay, we're going to take away those big head taxes, and instead of what you were paying, why don't you pay 25% of that to this fund?
That brings up something that I have a question about. So when it comes to budgetary issues, a little bit back to the homelessness issue,
Yeah.
do you believe that we have all of the funds necessary to perform the work, or do you believe that we need to raise taxes anymore?
No, I'm against raising taxes. We get taxed enough already for so much. It's government inefficiency that's causing this tremendous amount of, almost $1 billion in 10 years we've spent on homelessness, $170 million last year alone. And so this is a lot of money we're spending at homeless. The problem is the government doesn't do a good job of vetting all these nonprofit agencies. There's hundreds of them around town that just pop up. 2 or 3 people, they have a little nonprofit. The only people who benefit is the executive director that gets a 6-figure salary all of a sudden. How can they serve anybody with only 3 people, 3 personnel? And so I'm a metrics-based kind of guy. I want to see exactly, let me see your books, let me see your papers. And then if you can meet these certain criteria, you'll get funded again next year. If you can't, well, you're just no longer part of the program. And you have to let them know that. But see, we have so many special interest groups. Our politicians, they continue to be, fed and their pockets padded by all these benefits that they get as well. And you have to say, no, enough. So if it causes us to lose 100 of these small little nonprofits, and they're all going to be crying. They're all from various communities of color especially. I know a lot of them myself. And they're going to be crying and having a fit, but you have them to reapply. But show us what you can do, show us what you will do, and then you have to live up to that in order to get funded.
Again, seems practical.
Yes.
It's the man.
And doable.
Very doable.
See? But
And what you would, for people listening, wouldn't it be what you expect? That's
Yes.
already happening, but you're saying it's not happening.
No, it's not happening because we have too many special interests. And I think it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil around here. The small minority of voices that make all this ruckus and all this noise is what took our mayor's attention from serving the city to serving this small little special interest group. Got her in trouble with our Summer of Love last year. See? And now she's no longer even running. She can't even put her head out there anymore.
She's not even running?
No, Mayor Durkin, no.
I didn't know that. See,
Oh,
I'm not on the time.
yes,
I get on the
you-
times.
You heard it here first.
Oh, I did.
Yes. She announced last fall she was not running for re-election.
Wow. Yeah.
There's no way. I mean, all that stuff that she put us through last year would be used against her by every candidate in the field.
Of course, and
Yes.
rightfully so. I mean, people should be held accountable, and these offices, we need to look at them as public servants.
That's right.
Right? And,
That's right.
And that's why, another reason why I admire you is because
Yeah.
you are an example of someone who's doing it the right way. You lived a life.
That's
You
right.
experienced things. You went through losses and,
That's right.
and wins. You did all of
I've
that.
been at the very height of heights and I've been at the very bottom of bottoms.
Yes, and everywhere in
That's
between.
everywhere in between.
Right? And so those are the sorts of people that need to go in and once they have those experiences, try to use that wisdom and that knowledge to make our community better. We don't need these politicians coming in, going to school, then going to law school, then going into politics. We don't need that.
No. That's exactly right. I come at all this and let people know, hey, I'm not a politician by nature, and I don't want to be a politician because politicians only do politics for the sake of doing politics. Politics as usual. That's the last thing I want to do. I'm just coming at everyone as a concerned Seattle citizen who's been here for 40 years. And I've seen this beloved city of mine at the highest heights of its existence over the last 10, 20 years, 30 years. But the last half a dozen years or so, it's been down in the depths.
When would you say it was the height? 90s? It's got to be 90s, right?
Yeah,
I'm partial to the 90s.
I'd say the 90s, when all the tech firms moved in, the mid 90s, late 90s, the millennial turn, 2000, those were the really, boom years for Seattle. I mean, we had all these big companies moving in, tech was huge. We had all of our major sporting teams in town, and everything was just really going great, But I think it's this last half dozen or 8 years or so that the city has really taken a downward turn that it shows no sign of coming out of. And if we elect the same officials we keep electing, it's only going to continue. What's going to change?
How would you revive downtown?
Downtown.
Downtown is bad.
Downtown's terrible, terrible, terrible. I want to revitalize our downtown business core. And by that, you have to clean up downtown. You have to get these plywood boards off the windows. But the merchants are afraid that the next uprising, those windows will be broken out again, and the police won't respond. See, that's what they're afraid of. And so they just leaving the boards up there, and it looks like a third world country almost. But, this tourist season is wiped out again with the cruise industry. It was wiped out last year. We have to prepare for next year's cruise season when tens of thousands of visitors come in off those cruise ships every single day to downtown Seattle, Pike Place Market, and all the great shops and the stores we have. We have to get ready for that. The only way you can get ready for that is to make sure that our merchants are reassured that, looting will not happen. It won't happen on my watch. You'll never see a police car going up in flames on my watch, We'll make sure that those things do not happen. This mayor that we have let those things happen and just stuck her head in the sand and hoped that tomorrow will be a better day. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to be proactive. We need police officers who can be proactive and no longer have their hands tied, where they no longer even bother to apprehend anybody. No, I mean, crime is crime, and some people deserve to be arrested and prosecuted. We need a prosecuting attorney who will prosecute. We don't have one right now. So we've got several pieces of the puzzle that are missing. But I think it takes good leadership, especially in the mayor's office, who can say, okay, this is the city that I'm overseeing. These are the pieces of the puzzle that are all in place, and they're all good people that are doing and serving the city of Seattle as best as they can.
I really respect the fact that you didn't just bash the Seattle City Council too with that, because it's very easy to do. I would do it, first of all. I'm saying I would do it right now.
Yeah.
But you didn't, and that says a lot about your character, that you would come in and be the leader despite perhaps even potentially knowing that your council is not going to be supportive.
That's right.
Is that kind of how you view it?
Well, I'm the type of person who I feel like I can work with everybody. Across any lines and any boundaries. I mean, I've done this all my life. I feel like even with our current city council, I know personally there are 3 or 4 council members that are just sitting on the fence. They're kind of seeing which way the political winds blow. They get a little intimidated by all the radical left noise that comes over here. They'd love to come over to a more common sense approach, and they could and they would if they had a mayor who was a common sense mayor and said, hey, city council members, let's work together. Even if it's only 3 or 4 of you guys, the rest of them will come in. This all starts working on a majority.
Peer pressure.
Well, it's leadership.
Strong leadership.
Yeah.
I'm not strong arming anybody. I'm leading
No,
by example.
that's just street talk.
Yeah,
Peer
yeah.
pressure.
Let's come on.
How do we fix this situation, Kurt? Well, let's get it cleaned up,
Well,
and maybe others will follow. And we've had this domino effect right out there in that dinosaur.
Let's have some true talk. I mean, this current mayor would have thrown those council members under the bus. And they knew that. That's why they didn't come over to her. This current mayor threw our former police chief under the bus time and time again. That's not the kind of leadership you want. You want a mayor who's going to stand for you and work with you and support you, and you'll all do these things together.
Can you imagine having Carmen Best as your police chief and not standing behind her?
That was the biggest atrocity.
That's terrible,
yes,
is it not?
Yes. And Carmen Best just came out with an article a couple days ago, and she said that the decision to close the East Precinct was not her decision. But she would not say whose decision it was.
Because it's her boss's decision. She's a classy lady.
It has to be the mayor's decision.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. That's the only
She's the only one she reports to.
That's the only person she reports to.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So everybody can kind of figure it out. But It would have been better if Carmen said, hey, you know, Mayor Durkin decided to close the East Precinct. But see, politicians, they hate to do that because they're all in the same little swampy area together. You know, because at some point I'm gonna need your vote for my issue, at some point you're gonna need my vote for my issue. So we don't want to throw each other under the bus, but that's wrong. You know, we should work issue by issue. Okay, everybody come together, we got a new issue, let's talk about it. Okay, next issue come in next month, let's all bring together, talk about it, work on it. We shouldn't owe each other anything. We owe to the city of Seattle is all we owe back to our communities, not to each other.
And ladies, I love you, but we didn't have anything to do with that one. That was an all-girls decision
Well.
on that one. I'd probably get fired for that.
Yeah, somebody made those hard decisions, and I know it was hard. I was out at Chop and Chaz last summer, 3 or 4 days a week, you know, doing little video snippets and reporting back to the community how horrible this is. And where is our mayor? Where is our city council? None of them showed up. None of them showed any remorse. 2 people died. 2 African-American young men died. This is all about Black Lives Matter and communities that matter. Come on.
And exactly, come on. Because if it was really about that, and they really cared,
That's
those
right.
people would be out there on the streets with them, like
That's right.
civil rights leaders of the
That's
past.
right, that's right.
But it's not about that anymore. It's about something else.
No, that's exactly right. You know, our mayor went so far as to hire a homeless czar, okay, to help with the homeless issue. 150 grand a year. She hired a street czar for Chop and Chaz, Andre Taylor, for 150 grand a year, and a beautiful suite office downtown Seattle. And I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, I can be the street czar. I'll be out there talking to all our communities. I can be the homeless czar. I can be at the homeless encampments talking to our homeless population. Why not? See, our
Did they
mayor.
offer you?
I'm very
No,
glad.
I don't want the job, but as mayor, I would be out there and just say, hey, homeless folks, I am the mayor of Seattle. Let's talk about our situation here. How can we help you? You know, that's how you do it. And every community of color. I mean, I've been around here for 40 years. I work with every single community. African American, our Vietnamese, Asian, you know, our Indian communities, our Ethiopian communities. I know all these folks.
Give a shout out to the Turkish community.
And the Turkish community, and our white communities, you know.
Merhaba.
All of us are in this together, but we can no longer continue dividing and separating everybody.
We have to come together,
Yes.
and that's the only way we're going to solve all
And
this
it
stuff.
is the special interest groups that are causing this divisive
That's
move.
right.
And that's keeping us divided and afraid to express our opinion in public
Yeah.
because we might get bashed or boycotted.
That's
They
right.
should be
it's
called
scary
divisive
stuff.
interest
It's actually
groups.
pretty scary
It's
to know
sad. It's
that
sad.
a small group can actually destroy my livelihood
Yes.
and not being able to provide for the people that work for me
Yeah.
and their families and others. I mean, it's just horrible. I mean, it's wrong.
But again, it starts at the top, and if your leaders let that go, it continues to fester away. And that's just a big problem. I mean, I want to talk about our policing for a moment. You know, our police have been getting bashed, and they've been resigning and retiring, and we're down to just about 1,100 officers right now for the city of Seattle. We've already lost almost 100 officers due to retirement and early transition this year already, and lost 200 last year. So we're down 300 officers in the last 12 months. For a city that typically has about 1,400 officers on board, and research has shown over the years we need about 1,600 officers, so we've never been fully staffed. But you know, I think our police officers are not the problem. I mean, but the narrative nowadays around the country is that the police are bad and people, especially people of color, are good. I'm a person of color, you know, I mean, I can say these kind of things. I've never had issues with the police officers, and they've never had issues with me, because we treat each other respectfully, and that's where it begins. I want to establish a program where we honor our police officers every month. We have an Officer of the Month kind of program from the mayor's office. And also, I will reprimand those officers who have bad behavior and call them out in public and say, hey, no, Officer so-and-so, that's the wrong thing that person did. We'll run it through investigations, we'll get to the bottom of it, but hey, at this point, I cannot stand with some behavior like that I witnessed. So you have to be able to support all these aspects of it. The community will really come along behind that because they want to see good behavior being rewarded and bad behavior being reprimanded.
And right now, I think in somewhat of an ironic twist, it's the opposite.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I don't want to necessarily joke about this, but all those 1,100 cops that are left, they're all the dirty cops. Those are the only ones that probably want to stay, right? Because all the ones who want to do good things, who want to help their community, I've talked to a lot of those. I'm just joking. I'm sure there's a lot of good cops in the police force now.
Mostly.
But the good ones, they complain a lot about how they can't do what they want to do. They want to protect and serve. They want to make sure their community is a safe place to live, and they can't do any of those things right now.
Well, they don't have a very supportive environment to work in, for one thing. With our elected officials against them, defunding them, constantly defund. I'm against defunding. I'm all about, let's make sure they're well funded. Let's make sure they're well trained. I tell folks I was a professional athlete for 20 years. I trained and practiced every single day, but I was never perfect. I'm always going to make a mistake. I'm always going to have a turnover or force a bad shot or something. You can't train that out of a person.
But isn't that, and this is my issue with policing and the government in general, isn't that the point when we say we need to restrict government and we restrict the powers of government, is we know that it's going to mess up, right? But when the government messes up and takes a citizen's life, that's like all of us collectively committing a murder, right? And that's why I'm against capital punishment and all of that, but it's because mistakes can happen. So how is it that we can reduce the impact of police on the community, right? That's what you really want to do. You don't want to have the police do their job, because once it comes down to the police, it's a matter of force, always.
Well, the police have the force on their sidearm.
On their side, all the time,
I think it's a matter of regaining this trust, reestablishing this trust between the communities and the police officers. And that begins by getting our police officers back in the neighborhoods and walking their beat on occasion. Get out from those darkly tinted window cars, armored cars they're driving around in, and all this gear they're wearing. They look like superhero Ninja Turtles or something, with everything on, shoulder pads, knee pads, and all the gear. Take some of that stuff off and walk your neighborhood and just get to know the neighbors. The neighbors get to know you. And I was talking the other day on the video that, hey, we should get on foot patrol, we should get on bike patrol, and even better yet for the kids, we should get on horse patrol. Boy, remember how we used to go out and you see a police horse coming through? You see a police horse coming through your neighborhood, every kid would come out there and be right around that horse. The officer has a chance to, introduce himself, the kids can get to know them. These are the things that need to take place.
The other cities are doing that. Other cities, except for Seattle.
Which ones?
Go out to Linwood, go out there
in
to
Washington
County and see, outside of Seattle.
Those are the things you need to do.
Those are the things that really need to happen.
That's right.
And
of course, we can't do it now with only 1,100 officers because we're stretched so thin. But once we build our forces back up to 1,500 officers, now they're out of their vehicles, they're walking their neighborhoods, they're introducing themselves, first and last name, introduce yourself first and last name.
So back to budgetary issues then, does the police force have enough in their budget?
For what?
For what you would like to have them
Currently
have.
no. But see, I think as we start to, just like New York City did, they defunded their police officers, now they put a few $1 million back into it because they have to. We'll be having to do that too as crime continues to skyrocket and go off the charts and people are starting to get really worried about things. We'll be refunding the police here probably in the next year or so, and that's good. That's a good thing. But once we start recruiting new officers, and we're going to have to recruit them with sign-on bonuses, 20 grand, 50 grand, whatever it's going to cost. The money has to come from somewhere. Unfortunately, it's going to have to come from the federal government at this point with all the stimulus money that the government's printing and driving us further into debt. But Seattle needs to be in line to receive their fair share of government stimulus money to put back into our city, to hire more police officers, to open businesses, to make sure everything is back on track again.
What would be your role as mayor when it comes to either opening businesses or regulating businesses relating to COVID?
Hopefully COVID will be a thing of the past by the time I take the mayoral office next year, next January. But we'll see. Hopefully COVID is a thing of the past. I think there'll still be necessary precautions. Businesses should be allowed to make their own rules and regulations on who enters the building, the establishment. A lot of businesses, even before COVID, said, hey, no t-shirt, no entry, or no shoes, whatever. So they can do those basic minor kind of things. And I think that's going to be pretty well accepted still because of what we've come out of with the pandemic. If a business says, okay, you must wear your face mask in here, I think most people will oblige by that. Once you get inside, you can take your face mask off, just like you do in restaurants nowadays. I don't know why you have to wear one getting in and wear one going out, but sitting at a table and eat food, you can take your mask off. So, I want businesses to have the freedom to be creative, to do what they need to do to run their business. Government should not be overly regulatory. We should streamline our permitting process from several weeks or months down to just a couple of weeks. You submit a permit for whatever you need for your business, it goes through the process and back to you in a couple of weeks you have your answer. But this has never been the case. I mean, it's
It'd be cool to see, it'd be nice to be able to see us streamline mental health and substance abuse services to make it easier to get linked into services, because
Right.
business is not gonna make it without the support of that infrastructure, dealing with the chaos that we're currently faced with
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis with those that wanna disrupt and cause a fear factor of the customer base that is, we're trying to attract, and then the fact that we don't have officers that are available other than maybe an hour later, but the incident is gone, and then we're left to resolve the problem ourselves. We're not trained
No.
to do that. We're not social workers or cops.
Yeah.
We're business people who are trying to make a living by being able to invite all communities into our storefront to buy goods and services. And
Right.
it's frustrating to know that the person that we see on a day-to-day basis isn't getting access. Why?
Yeah.
They say to call 211, you call 211, you get put on hold and get lost in that transaction
Yeah.
and system. And then eventually when you do get in, you gotta call somebody else, and then it takes forever for that
It
person.
does. It does.
And then by the time we're waiting, the phone dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's
I know.
almost like not fair
Yeah.
to the
yeah.
person that's ready, cognitive.
I know.
And, but somehow that needs to be fixed, just like we do with business.
Yeah.
And one of the other thing is, I heard last night in a dialogue with the community with the police from Seattle University, they had this Zoom meeting last night, somebody brought up the cost of overtime within the police department and the driving cost of that.
Sure.
And in private business, that stuff would not fly.
Well, that's
That's-
true. That's true. That's negotiated by the police union, though, of course. But okay.
But I think there's
But as a
result, if you start looking at these other agencies amongst departments in our city, is there a way to streamline and make it easier, cost effective, that we don't lose those basic services by fighting over one versus the other?
You would think, of course, resources are going to be in short supply for mental health services, unfortunately. I mean, and mental health issues are going to be our next pandemic coming through after this pandemic moves out. All these folks who've been suffering with the last year, with all the isolation and depression and everything else, they'll be coming through. I've talked to a couple mental health professionals the last couple of days, 2 or 3 of them. Every one of them is slammed with patients right now. One's even working on Memorial Day weekend on Monday because patients need to get in.
I heard Ballard Swedish, I talked to somebody from Ballard Swedish this morning.
They're
Their
slammed.
psych ward, they're capped.
That's right.
I mean, there's no.
So
I think there's a potential argument that could say that mental health issues have been a bigger pandemic
Yeah.
than COVID this whole time. If you look at military deaths, I saw a statistic, there was something like 400 suicides in the military
That's right.
over the last year, and something in the neighborhood of 20 or 40 COVID deaths.
That's right, yeah. So mental health issues have always been with us, but it's just nothing that we've paid a lot of attention to. And for whatever reason, it still has the stigma and the taboo to it all, that people don't want to talk about it. but I think they will be talking about it more and more. I mean, this is part of my work I do with my foundation, is really work with mental health awareness, suicide prevention, especially for young kids, of which we lose 2 school-age children every single day in the state of Washington. See, and so that's 600 kids a year, almost 700 kids a year. And that's what happens, but until we really start focusing in on this and paying attention and then providing the resources, we need more mental health professionals. My foundation work, we're out there looking for mental health professionals or students who are going into the mental health profession. Students of color especially, who can go out to our communities of color, because that's even more stigmatized and more taboo to talk about mental health issues in communities of color. So we have a long way to go before we can really supply all the adequate help. These professionals that are working and slammed right now, they'll be slammed for the next 5-6 years.
You know, I was a liaison to Consejo Counseling, and one of the issues that they had is that us Latino Hispanic men don't want to have that stigma of having a mental illness or a substance abuse, and we tend to shy away from those sort of organizations or programs and go to the church.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we go to the clergy, we'll go into confession, we'll sit in there and let our sins out, walk out the door, and then start all over.
That's right.
You know,
That's exactly right.
I've been saved
That's right.
for the day. But that's really, it's a known fact
Yeah.
amongst our community that,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
our
I mean,
community too, same
because
thing.
it's afraid. I mean, the thing is we're afraid to have that stigma,
Yes.
and then it's going to follow us, and then we're going to be dumbed down by our peers.
That's right.
Well, we can
family.
extend that to the broader human community, because that's true of every single group that I know
I
of,
think
is that,
so.
especially the men,
Yeah.
don't want to discuss weakness, don't want to especially discuss mental weakness.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, especially the men.
Right.
So I think every community suffers a great deal from mental challenges and issues.
I just had that stigma from Ballard.
Well-
Growing up in Ballard amongst my
Right.
peers, you know, and
It's the
you don't
same.
want to, you know, hey, maybe you got to quit drinking for a bit.
Yeah.
You know, you're
Yeah.
having a problem. Oh, yeah, no, I don't have a problem.
Mhm.
And then eventually it catches up with us, and
Sure.
then it's either deform or reform. And we can either stay deformed and
Yeah.
stay stuck and then have that consequence, or we
Mhm.
can move out of that and have a new quality of life. And I think
Yeah.
the new quality of life is, you know, being a participant, not a leader, but I like to participate.
Mm.
And then when called on to give service on a certain project, I don't have a problem doing that.
Right.
You know, and take that leadership, but be inclusive of everybody, you know, and show each individual's strength. Thank you very much, you did a great job. Get them involved with something, so when they leave, they feel good that they participated in it. And,
Yeah.
But your story, when I heard it the first time, I swear to
Yeah.
God, man, I just thought it was so powerful.
Yeah, that's
From
right.
your heart attack,
That's right.
you know, and
That's
having
right.
to figure out how you're gonna get back and move forward.
Yeah, put it all back together again, that's right. But that's what I did, and I reached out for help. I didn't have a problem with, you know, being stigmatized or people, you know, staying away from me and all this. No, I wanted to use my platform to speak, especially to our communities of color, especially to our men, that, hey, you know, this happens to everybody at some point in their life, and you have to be able and willing to reach out for help.
It's especially powerful coming from you, though. At least for me,
Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s. Basketball was my favorite sport. I loved the Sonics.
Yeah.
You know, if one of those guys had, and I'm sure they did, because, you know, people have been talking about this stuff for a long time now, but if one of those guys came out and said something like that, you know, it would be more for me than if, you know, maybe even my dad said
Yes,
it,
that's
you
right.
know?
That's right, that's right, that's exactly right, so. And that's the kind of platform I've had, you know, being a former athlete and all that, and, you know, long-time business person, long-time community person, you know, so, you know, and I'm of color, so I can speak to these kind of things, and people will listen, you know, so.
James Donaldson knows Seattle.
We have-
That's just the way it is, man.
we
If
have
you
a lot of
need
work.
some expert advice or somebody that at least to lean on, you know who it is.
That's right.
He's the man,
That's
James
right.
Donaldson from
Yeah.
here.
I thought we knew Seattle.
You know, no, we just got schooled on Seattle. Huh?
That's right.
My program was on, and it was my thinking cap, and I was like a kid with a sponge absorbing this information, and I'm gonna use it.
A kid with a sponge or a sponge?
A kid with a brain with a sponge, you know,
Yeah,
something like that. I mean,
I've
it sounded good in my head, you know?
It didn't sound so good coming out.
Oh, I
but
bet
it's-
it did.
No, it
No.
did, it did.
Oh,
I'm
you're
just
so-
giving you.
I've
You're
been
so
in Seattle
nice.
longer you guys been alive, so.
That's definitely true. Okay, so, do you still have time, or should we wrap it up?
We got a few more minutes, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask a little bit, we started talking about the subject of drugs a little bit. As what's going down in Portland right now, where they're decriminalizing and legalizing a lot of things, what do you think about that, and what do you think about the city's role in drugs and drug legislation and how we should enforce it, things like that?
You know, I'm a big proponent of, we have to enforce the rules that are on the books currently. Now, we can always go and revise them and rewrite them and all the rest of those things. That's the policy-making meetings that we'll have, and that's fine. But the rules that are on the books currently, we have to be able to enforce these things. So to decriminalize just about everything here in the city of Seattle, other than rape or murder, essentially, you know, you can get away with anything, and they're not going to prosecute you. That's just not the right way for a society, a healthy society to be. You know, I'm a big student of Martin Luther King Jr., you know, and one of his speeches was, right is right and always has been, and wrong is wrong and always has been and always will be. And, you know, these are the separations, and these are the things that keep society together, to make us work. You know, most of us are law-abiding citizens, and we just pay attention to basic rules and laws that are, you know, that are in our mind, you know, with our values and our morals, or that are actually on the books.
But isn't it complicated, like you said there at the end, when you have so many laws on the books, right? Like, you know, I think we're all three, I'm probably the least, law-abiding citizens, but I'm sure you've jaywalked. I'm sure we've all, you know, done something that was on the books illegal, and I think maybe you said at the beginning where you talked about legislation and all that, it just seems like there are a lot of rules that have not been enforced for a long time, even before all of this craziness.
Right.
And it seems like we should do our best to reduce those laws so that we don't have an overly burdened system, so that people aren't confused if they're breaking the law or not, and also so that, you know, people aren't mistreated in, what do you call that, in non-consistent ways. Based off of maybe some group that they're in. We don't want them to be mistreated, right? Which is basically, in some ways, treated by the law. We don't want them treated by the law. We want them treated like everyone else is treated, right? So do you think we just need to reduce certain laws, or what do you think about all that?
If certain laws are no longer relevant, sure, take them off the books, that's fine.
But what about like nonviolent crime issues? Like, a lot of people are in jail and prison for nonviolent drug offenses, and that has a huge toll on society,
Yes.
on their communities, on their families.
Of course, of course. All those sentences need to be relooked at and either reduced or let them go if they've served a certain amount of time, they've been good prisoners or good behavior, what have you. I'm not for locking up prisoners or locking up people just because of drug offenses. I think drug offenses need to be treated, you know, in a substance abuse facility. Maybe you're on parole, but you don't need to serve time behind prison bars for a drug offense unless you are a major trafficker across the border or something. But, you know, these things just have a tendency to hurt society, hurt our communities, hurt our families when everything is broken up like that. But there are efforts now to relook at all these sentencing guidelines that are in place, and I hope they do a better job and they can really look at, you know, the cause and effect of all of this. Things that are no longer relevant, like I said, take them off the books, that no longer need to apply. But I think for society to really function in the best interest of everybody, you have to have a certain amount of rules. I mean, you can't just let everybody just jaywalk like crazy. I mean, traffic would be snarled up, people would be getting hit. Now, whose fault is that?
You know, I was coming in from South Everett, 99, the shoreline into Seattle the other day. And outside of Seattle was just awesome. I mean, it was just like, whew,
Yeah.
deep breath. Like I'm rolling in 145th at South.
Sure.
All of a sudden I see these guys watching these young girls
Sure.
along the Aurora corridor, and very young. And so I'm going to myself, oh my God, and I know a few of them from working the streets, cleaning, doing landscaping. And I saw one of them crying, you know. and
One of
I'm
the
going,
girls or
One of the
guys?
girls
Okay.
crying. And I saw the group of guys watching her and saying, you bitch, get back out there on the street. Get there right now or I'm beat your ass. And she turned around and she started walking and I go, oh my God. I wanted to intervene,
Yeah.
but I know I can't intervene because that's not my place. But I can talk about it. And so I go rolling down even further. There's this young girl, scantily dressed, showing her stuff, and I'm going, oh my God. And there's another guy watching her,
Sure.
keeping her eye on her. And I'm going, is this what we have become in decriminalizing things that are allowing adult men to traffic these young girls for money?
That's right.
But I'm employing her. I manage her money, I take care of her because nobody else will. So mind your own business.
Yeah, but if it's against law, it's against law.
You know, and that's really disturbing. And that's something that I see. And when I see him, I say, hey, how you doing? Hey, Rory, how you doing? I said, you need a mask? No, I'm okay. You know, you need some. I got some candy or some popcorn. You know, you hungry? You need a sandwich? Oh, I'm okay. Thanks. But they'll come up to me and they'll walk by me, and they'll see their guy. I said, be safe. Thanks, Rudy. You know, it's just one of those things. But that's the closest I get to it. You know, and seeing it. But and I'll be driving down and I'll see them and they'll see me and they'll go. You know, like.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very sad. Or, you know, seeing
It
these young
is.
girls being used and abused on the streets. They're somebody's daughter, you know, they're
course.
somebody's kid.
Of course.
And
of
yet
course,
we,
of course.
we adults and able-bodied people just turn a blind eye to those poor girls that are gonna suffer for the rest of their life because there's unintended consequence to that.
That's right.
We not only turn a blind eye,
Yeah.
but we also trick ourselves into thinking we're compassionate by voting for certain rules and legislations that are oftentimes going to hurt these people. It seems like to me, a lot of the efforts in you think of Seattle, right? You think of liberal people who want everybody to be at least on a certain level, a certain starting point, right? That's what you think about, and that seems to be, you know, the people in the city that I've met.
Yeah.
But they vote for these things that constantly undermine what they're looking to achieve.
Give me an example. I don't know.
Well, for example, I would say with the prostitution, I mean, this is probably unpopular, but I think that the way to reduce the crime in prostitution is to legalize and regulate. And a lot of countries, or not a lot, but several countries have done that. Same thing with drugs and I mean, alcohol when it was prohibition times. You legalize and regulate, and then all of a sudden you cut at the knees all of the underbelly, right? And we don't like to think about it because it's a dirty thing to think about when people ruin their bodies with drugs, when women sell their bodies
So you'd
for
be
sex.
supportive of a drug injection site with
No.
a brothel at the same
No,
place?
but that's the thing, is that we have this system in the society right now that is
I disagree with
so
that, totally.
complicated. Well, of course,
I mean,
I don't agree
I'd
with
be,
that.
I mean, I would disagree with it because it creates other,
You can't have something be illegal and then provide it, right? That's where that whole system breaks
Being
down.
provided or allowed to exist?
Really, either one. If you make it illegal, then there's going to be this underground entity with it. Whereas if you make it legal, then the underground entity goes away. Now that's not the same as popping up methadone clinics and having heroin still be illegal, right? That's more of the image is seeing that doctors are prescribing methadone, or doctors are prescribing maybe heroin to functioning adults even, right? But this more regulated process is going to be the answer in a way that is the antithesis of what we were talking about when it comes to practicality, right? Because we think, well, if we don't want something, we make it illegal. But we've seen that that doesn't work, especially with drugs and prostitution.
Especially if you're not gonna enforce it, I mean.
But how do you enforce, the drugs might be a little bit easier, but I don't think it is. But the prostitution is very difficult to enforce, right? Because they're trying to go after Johns, they're not going after the ladies anymore, and for good reason.
That's the problem though.
But then they can't catch them, and then they can't prove it, and then they can't, do all these things.
Well, the bottom line
They have
is those
things
young
out there.
girls of color that are on that street, on that strip right there, are being ignored by the rest of Seattle and given a free pass to be used and abused by adult men to make a profit. And that's the sad reality, with no positive outcome for their future, other than they're gonna be, they're definitely gonna have issues as they develop and become older. I mean, and the diseases that come along with it, the mental health that comes along with it, the internal organs that are impacted and affected by it. It's a sad reality on our streets here in Seattle. And somebody needs to at least go out there and do outreach to these young girls and give them another pathway of hope versus what's happening on the streets now. I mean, whether they want to do it or they don't want to do it, at least give them an exit strategy, I believe.
And how's that any different than drug activity on the streets or gang activity on the streets? These young people get caught up in this stuff.
They get caught up in the.
It might not be different.
It's no different.
It's really not.
I don't see it
No,
any
it's
different.
not. It's the same thing. I mean, you see I see it every day, and there's no exit strategy coming from those that can versus those that can't, and the ones that offer that quick fix and that quick buck is more enticing than what we're doing now. And
Yeah.
I mean, if I could get new shoes and a new coat and get high and get a little car to drive around and pedal this stuff for the man. That's way easier than going over and schlepping up concrete and
That's
busting
right.
out trails
Exactly.
and stuff like that.
That's right.
And,
That's right.
and so that becomes based on our insidious news media in Hollywood. We take a look and it becomes titillating to us that that's how I want to be, that's what I want to do, that's what I'm going to be. But it doesn't always work out that way.
For the young people especially. I mean, a lot of them are runaways, broken homes, bad backgrounds they come from. And they get caught up in this kind of stuff. And you can't arrest your way out of it. I mean, that's always been shown to be true. You cannot arrest your way. Our prisons are already overflowing. Where are you going to put everybody? And so.
But that's the exact problem. So if you can't arrest people, and you're also having difficulty providing them with programs, could we not just simply make it so that people are free to make these admittedly probably poor choices for themselves? And then, back to practicality, if they commit a crime, if they do something that hinders somebody else,
Rein them
then
in,
they
give 'em
have to pay the consequences.
Rein them
for
in,
those.
give them a timeout like you do a 3 to a 5-year-old. 3-year-old gets 3 minutes in the corner, 5-year-old gets 5 minutes in the corner, and then they get the freedom to come back out. Do the same thing with the adults. I mean, because otherwise they become harmful to self and others. I become the victim. Why? Because they got a free pass. And you get that 2-year-old that was shot in the head in the Central District or South Seattle. I mean, that 2-year-old wasn't doing anything other than with the family unit. And nobody cares about that stuff. I mean, the thing is there has to be a way to do some sort of intervention. The best prevention is a quick intervention to go in and treat the problem of unresolved conflict. And how do we treat it? De-educate it, incarcerate it, or medicate it. But there has to be a solid plan to be able to address these issues. And sometimes it's a timeout in the King County Jail. Jail is just as much a part of recovery as anything else in treatment or anything. I mean, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I'm not saying prison, I'm saying there's a difference between being incarcerated for a few days and getting a timeout.
Right. I don't know if that does much to help the young girls you're talking about. You gotta get the pimps and the ones that are running the girls.
No, I agree with that.
Those are the ones you need to
Those
get
are
off
the
the
ones,
streets.
those are the ones.
I think he was talking about drugs.
I'm talking about drugs, where you have somebody acting out in the community. But when we get into the Johns and the pimps, or the street agents, that's what I was told they're called, street agents for the girls, take them out, pull them in, take them out, disrupt that, and just keep
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
But there's a risk factor to that too, because a lot of these men are carrying
Yeah, well,
firearms, and all hell is to break loose
This
and
is what you
something
got,
bad.
this is what you gotta do, fix
You know,
all
That's
this.
why they carry guns.
You know,
right.
and that's the thing, it's a
That's
vicious, it's an absolute vicious
But
cycle.
right now, I think all of our law enforcement has to determine on how they're gonna allocate their resources. And these girls in the street with their pimps watching over them, it's a small, minor issue compared to the big issues they have to deal with. And so that's why it goes unchecked. And these girls are out there up and down Aurora all day long. So,
And it's a known fact, but go to Shoreline, not happening. Linwood just cracked down, yesterday or the day
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
They cracked down on the Johns, and they caught somebody that was trafficking these young girls. He's now sitting in the
Good.
Snohomish County Jail, and that's what I think it really needs to take.
but they have the resources to do that. Seattle doesn't.
Seattle does not. I like your idea about getting the officers in the neighborhoods,
That's
walking,
right.
talking, and.
It's not an immediate fix, but
No,
over the
it's-
years, as that little 8-year-old grows up to an 18-year-old, and he knows Officer so-and-so, and the officer knows that little kid, you've got a relationship, you've got a bond, you've got a respect with each other. And chances are that kid who's had that kind of role modeling throughout his life is not gonna go on a bad pathway. You know, he's gonna grow up, go to high school, graduate, go to college, do the thing, you know? But without those kind of things, our kids go everywhere. Society is totally all over the place now. There may come a time where prostitution is legal, just like we never thought cannabis would be legal. But now it is in most states. And so this is the evolution of society, this is how it happens.
And I hope that we can transition to a more community-based and love-oriented approach to things, and that the state and policing and all of that, you know, even if we fund it appropriately, it can maybe take more of a back seat to our lives, because really it should just be the framework that allows us to live our lives. It shouldn't be what dominates our lives.
No, but it's not unless you are breaking the law.
I think, well, in some ways though it is, because how many taxes do we all have to pay to keep this thing going? What about all these restrictions now with COVID and living your life freely in that way? I mean, I think that the state really does, not the state of Washington,
Yeah.
but the public sector, it really does infringe upon a lot more of people's rights than we maybe like to admit.
Oh, yeah, I know that. I was talking more in the law enforcement area.
Oh, right, pardon.
But no, you're right. Government has restricted a lot of our rights. And now, if you're on the wrong side of the issues, you can easily be canceled.
That's right.
And you have no voice anymore. That's not right. That's not democracy. This is almost like living in China.
And not America, yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
But this is what we've gotten to. And unless enough people really speak up and say, hey, this is not right, this is not democracy, nothing's going to change. It's going to keep on going down the slippery path.
Well, like you said, it's that small percentage that gets the squeaky.
Well,
I
you
mean,
look at
the small percentage that has been really loud and
well, who's running our politicians? Big tech, Facebook, Twitter, social media. They fund these campaigns. They fund these politicians, and they can take the former president of the United States off social media. That was unheard of several years ago. That would never have happened. But now this is what can happen. And if you post stuff on Facebook that is not, in accordance with CDC guidelines, what CDC wants to believe, then they can take you off.
Same thing with YouTube, which
And
is where
YouTube,
where
yes.
we're doing this.
YouTube the same way, all these social media things. I mean, this is really what's running our societies now, along with the politicians that they're all in bed with and the media, those three big entities all working together.
The manipulation machine.
Yes, yeah, they get you to think a certain way, they want you to think a certain way, and if you don't think that way, you're in danger of being canceled out.
I think James Donaldson for mayor has really given us a great opportunity to expand our mindsets and look at things maybe a little bit differently today. I mean, I
We hope
really
so.
think you're just an amazing person.
Yeah, well,
You know,
thank you. Like I said, I'm just a regular, everyday, concerned citizen from Seattle. That's all I am, and that's all I want to be. But I know the only way you can really make change is to be around the decision-making table, the policy-making table. You have to have a seat at the table and talk about these things and put it into action.
If somebody watching this right now wanted to get a hold of you, how can they go about doing that?
Well, you go through my campaign website, which is teamdonaldson.org, and it's easy to find. Just type it in, pops right up. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. I've got an email address in there. I've got an alternative phone number in there. You can call me, text me, email me. We are now trying to qualify for our democracy vouchers. So that's a program specific to Seattle voters. So we need 600 electronic signatures, which we just about have now, and 600 contributions of $10 or more. Which we don't quite have yet. So that's what we're working on, the big push for $10 contributions to our democracy voucher qualifications.
And can you do that on the website, do the donation?
Yes, you can. So as long as you're a Seattle voter, you get that $10 will go right to our qualifications.
Please, everyone who's listening, consider it.
Yes.
I suppose we should wrap it up. I've taken up a lot of your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it, James.
Thank you.
I'm very hopeful after talking to you
Good.
that at least in this particular election for this particular office, there is one candidate, at least one candidate,
Yeah.
who is a practical person, who is a real person, and who is a caring and committed person to the city and the community. So I thank you for being all those things, and I thank you for putting your name in the hat, because that's a hard thing to do right now.
Yeah, well.
And maybe ever, but especially now.
I really feel prepared, especially after the life events I've gone through the last 5-6 years. I mean, financial ruin, closing my business, major heart surgeries and surgeries in particular, divorce, my mother passing. I've gone through all the foreclosure, and bankruptcy. I've gone through everything that all your viewers out here are probably having to face themselves. So I know and I can resonate really well with what people have gone through or what they may be going through soon. Once they lift this moratorium on evictions and foreclosure, you're going to see a mass exodus of people from their homes. Where are they going to go? Probably to the streets. Unless we can work with our landlords and say, okay, landlords, here's a voucher from the city. We will get you paid in full over time, but please allow this tenant to stay here. See, that's the kind of conversations you got to have with these kind of folks. And so I have just, loved this city from the day I walked in here and played with the Seattle Supersonics back in 1980. And that's another thing. Once we get some of these things taken care of, I'm going to work on bringing the Sonics back.
Hell yes.
Yes.
Okay, now we're talking about real issues.
Let's get them back. Let's get them back.
Okay, I like to hear that. And would you want to at some point, because that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about today, but we just ran out of time,
Yeah.
is hearing your story and hearing about those ups and downs, because I heard a little piece of it, and it's very inspiring, and I think it also helps to connect you, like you said, to people who have gone through maybe not the same experience, but
Yeah.
similarly difficult experiences.
Let's do it. That'd be a great additional episode. So let's go ahead and do that.
All right, many blessings.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
thanks,
James.
Karen.
I'm looking up teamdonaldson.org, is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay,
That's us.
there it is,
That's us.
teamdonaldson.org.
Okay,
Yeah,
Rudy's
A lot of
got it.
information about his candidacy.
That's right.
James Donaldson for mayor, and he's the man.
TeamDonaldson.org.
That's right.
All right.
You got it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, guys.
Donaldson. You know what?
Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Just
Donaldson.
a
See you
great
guys.
All right.
treat.
Take care, everybody.
All right.